Firstly, I want to thank the valuable voices that we've heard here in Vídalínskirkju today. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge with us. My name is Heiðrún Helga, and I'm a pastor in Borgarnes Church. I've only been in that field of work for a few years, though. I used to work with young refugees in Copenhagen. I have a master's degree in sociology of religion, and the aim of my final thesis was to find out how young refugees develop their identity in a new cultural setting. Mohammed, we have to talk later. When my research period ended, I dedicated my career to working with those young people, a group that still today takes up a big part of my heart. While working with them, I remember that I promised myself that one day I would share their voices, that I would tell their stories, do whatever it takes to guard their rights in our society so they can get the same opportunities as other people their age. Then I moved to Iceland, started working in the church, and the thought sometimes hit me that I was not fulfilling my promise. But still, when Sigurvin asked me to speak here today, my first thought was, that is not my microphone to hold. Who am I to talk about refugees in Iceland when I should be the one listening, educating myself? Is my research even relevant years later and in a completely different setting? And then I remembered that often when I ask people to talk in my church in Borgarnes, they reply, "Me? But I never go to church. I don't even believe in God." Which to I always reply, that may well be, but your voice needs to be heard. So even though I was hesitant to come onto this stage today, I'm going to say to myself that my voice, their voices through my voice, need to be heard. So thank you once again for having me. The title of my thesis was De smukke unge mennesker, a study of identity formation among young people with different ethnic backgrounds. I did empirical research in a school for people aged 15 to 25 that had recently arrived in Denmark as refugees, most of them on their own. I did interviews and field observations over a period of 6 months. The purpose was to take a look at the way in which the students develop their identity through education and socialization. As the empirical data could not stand alone, I used theories within the field of sociology in order to come to a conclusion. I'm not going to bore you to death with theories on identity, but as the French scholar Pierre Bourdieu said, theory without empirical research is empty. Empirical research without theory is blind. So I'm going to give you a short introduction on the theories that I used for my research. I used theories regarding identity formation in multinational societies provided by 3 British scholars, Anthony Giddens, Richard Jenkins, and Stuart Hall. Their theories state that our identity is in constant process, constantly developing and redeveloping. And if we think about our lives, who we were, who we are, and who we want to be, this makes perfect sense. Hopefully we all get to develop and then redevelop who we are and how we view the world around us. According to Anthony Giddens, our identity is constantly being added to and built on. He used the term self-biography in this context and states that our identity is built on what we think we are now, according to our past and present circumstances, together with what we would like to become, our hopes and dreams for the future. Back in the day, people were born into certain roles in society, often not very flexible roles, but today we are constantly exposed to different global influences, and therefore each person needs to construct and constantly reconstruct some sort of a self. This becomes very prominent when we move to a new country, when we are taken out of the social context we are born into and know, and therefore have to build up a completely new image of who we are. that can be challenging, especially to begin with, when the unwritten rules of society are still a mystery to us. When we realize that the knowledge and skills that have defined us all our lives are of little or no value in the new social setting, that creates a rift in our self-biography. It is a fact that immigrants are put into a certain social category, according to language skills, looks, religion, etc. They often have fewer opportunities regarding jobs, education, and even housing. But through my research, I noticed, however, that many of my informants saw their new social setting in a very positive way. The opportunities in Denmark as being endless and the freedom unlimited. They did not compare themselves with Danish people or even other foreigners. Their main focus was on learning the language and to build a life in a new country. Keep the narrative and the self-biography flowing. That underlines what Giddens stated, that we feel like it is up to us to create and recreate the social self. Richard Jenkins agrees with Giddens that social identity is not something that is fixed, but constantly being developed and redeveloped. The difference is, however, that our interaction with others matters the most while developing our social self. According to his theories, identity is something we create in relation to other people. He puts emphasis on our interaction with others while we develop our personal self. And here, things start to get interesting. Through my research, it was very clear that my informants were very happy about being in Denmark, many of them fleeing horrible situations in their home countries. In general, they were thankful that the Danish social system assisted with housing, education, and what they needed to start a new life in safety. But when new students arrived at the school, it was heartbreaking to hear the students who had lived in Denmark for a longer time giving advice to the newcomers. Never go around in large groups, always give way on the sidewalk, smile if someone looks at you, keep your voice down, be extra polite, never run on the streets, not even when you're missing the bus, otherwise the cops will arrive. I'm not criticizing the Danish cops, I'm just sharing their experience of having brown skin in the streets of Copenhagen, their experience of safety. I take my safety for granted, but my informants felt they had to earn their safety, created by following a complicated set of rules. And how do we develop our social identity in relation to others if this relation to others is complicated and even unsafe? It is a common misunderstanding that people don't get harassed in our streets for looking different from the majority. I once stood next to my friend at a bus stop in Copenhagen. She is Danish. She wears a hijab. An old woman came to the bus stop, rolled her eyes and blurted out, "Isn't it incredible? There is not a single Danish person left in this city." She wasn't talking about me, the foreigner. She was talking about my friend, the Danish person. How does it affect our social identity if we can't even wait for the bus in safety? Earlier I called it a misunderstanding, but maybe racism is just something that we refuse to face. Rupi Kaur wrote a poem that says, "No one on this planet is in more denial than the white man, who, regardless of all the evidence in front of him, still thinks racism and sexism and all the world's pain don't exist." And I warn you to look her up, this dangerous poet, because her books are banned from more educational institutions in America. I have a friend that lives in Copenhagen. She often experiences people yelling at her on the streets for being Muslim, that she should get back home, that she doesn't belong. One day she was so tired of it that she turned around and yelled back, "I'm not even Muslim, I'm from Brazil." And the man, he apologized. This is such ridiculous behavior in the first place, and it gets even more ridiculous. "Oh, I'm sorry, love, I didn't know you were from Brazil." What kind of world is this man living in, thinking he can humiliate a woman from one cultural background, but is truly sorry when he finds out that she is from another? How does it affect our social identity if we can't even walk down the street without being treated with such disrespect? We have to start calling people out on behavior like this. Stuart Hall stated that our identities change in relation to the cultural systems and contexts that surround us. This means that our self is continuously developing in relation to social norms, media representation, and interaction with other people. Values and cultural narratives can therefore impact how we are seen by others and how we see ourselves. Therefore, as cultural systems change due to social movements or shift in public discourse, so can our identities. According to Hall, we put ourselves into certain cultural categories and identify us with the meanings and values given to them. Through my research, I found out that that was exactly what my informants did. They are categorized by outer society as foreigners, and that is what forms their identity in a new country. But that doesn't have to be negative at all. In the school I did my research, the emphasis was always on how proud the students should be of their roots, how lucky they were to have this huge international network in Denmark. Them being different was praised and lifted. They were told to be proud of their different backgrounds, experiences, and skills. As they learned the language, learned about the Danish culture and society, they slowly but steadily gained enough self-esteem to go out in society, and from the school's side, they were constantly told that they had every opportunity to become valuable Danish citizens, and that Denmark was lucky to have so many beautiful young people to make their country richer. Therefore, the school song was De smukke unge mennesker. The school was their safe place, a place they could express themselves and ask questions, develop a full social identity in relation to people that had similar experience and people that truly supported their journey. Out in society, reality was different. I had the feeling then, and now I know, because luckily, young Danish people are now sharing with us their experience of having more than one cultural background, and we need to listen. This is Basim, a Danish sweetheart that took part in the Danish X Factor in the year 2008, only 15 years old at the time. He later won the Danish Eurovision Song Contest. People absolutely loved him, and they still do. He is Danish. He is of Moroccan origin. Lately, he has been opening up about his roots and admitting that through his whole childhood, he was nervous what consequences it would have if he spoke too much about his background. And I quote, "Will they think I'm strange if I tell them that I am a Muslim?" I wonder what it does to our social identity when we are born and raised in a country that doesn't welcome, let alone praise and lift up our different backgrounds, experiences, cultures, and languages. My informants often told me that when they spoke their mother language on the bus or on the train, people would yell at them, tell them to speak Danish. Where does all this anger come from? What are we so afraid of? Basim states, "I always felt that I had to be the extra nice one. As a child, I quickly learned that if I smiled a little extra, was extra polite, spoke nicely, then I could maybe avoid being put into a box. If I did a little better, people would see me as an individual and not just one from a group. a group they already had an opinion about. Does this ring a bell? Exactly what my informants said to each other when giving good advice on living in Denmark. Imagine having to do this in your own country. What a complicated and exhausted set of rules to live by. And Basim continues. I know the looks, the comments, the hidden prejudice. I know how the media has drawn a picture of Muslims as something else, something foreign, something that doesn't really fit in. The media is powerful, and it holds great responsibility. Stereotyping, like Basim refers to, is not only unfortunate, it is dangerous. It is dehumanizing. Because when we say the Muslims are like this, the Muslims are like that, we are referring to so many different people. And by putting a large group of people in a tiny box, we are robbing them of their humanity. Because by doing that, we can't hear their opinions, hopes and dreams, things they like and dislike. We can't see their joys and daily lives, and we never get the picture of a whole person. Let me tell you how those Muslims are words you are never going to hear from people who actually have Muslims in their lives. It is hard for most of us to imagine, but I want you to try. Imagine moving to a new country and being referred to as the Christian. Imagine being born and raised in a country and being referred to as the Christian. I am a pastor, and I wouldn't even like to be categorized like that, because I am so much more than my religion. Here is a picture of Christians, Icelandic Christians. Quite a narrow description of who we are, right? Maybe you are wondering why I'm taking all these examples from Denmark when we are here in Iceland. And I can tell you why. Because it is hard to face the truths about our own society. It is often as if we can't see things clearly when they are right in front of our eyes. It makes it somewhat easier for us to face the situation in other countries, because then a tiny voice behind our ear can whisper, it's not like that here. It's not like that here in Iceland. But it is. We should not think for 1 second that it is any different in Iceland. This is an article from Moggin, an Icelandic newspaper. The headline, "The boys roam the streets in flocks." The journalist names the neighborhood and states that the situation is hard because 5 12-year-old boys repeatedly show violent behavior towards other students. Part of the group is said to be from the Middle East. We read a bit further. 4 out of 5 boys are foreign. We read a bit further. At least 2 of them are from the Middle East or Arabic speaking. We read further, even though we really don't want to, but it gets worse. It is hard to get the parents into dialogue with the school. It says the men have no respect for women. It says the women are not allowed to represent their homes. It says this view passed on to the boys that do not respect women, it says. And I underline the fact that this is not from a comment section on social media, but from a newspaper that people read and subscribe to. It is harmful to write words like this in a newspaper because it affects a lot of people in a very negative way. And how does it affect our identity formation to read headlines and articles like this? How does it affect your daily life if you are a 12-year-old boy that fits this description in the neighborhood mentioned or in other neighborhoods? Hopefully they are not reading the newspaper at all. But I think I would smile a little wider too. Be extra polite. Be careful to make sure the people around me see that I am not at all violent. We are talking about 12-year-old children here. I guess I too would think twice before roaming around in a flock, which is, by the way, what boys this age do. The headline sounds like there are hundreds of them, roaming around like wild animals. But the boys mentioned in the article are 5 in total. 2 of them are from the Middle East. Maybe. Do you see what is happening here? How does it affect us if we are fathers living in the neighborhood mentioned? Loving fathers that respect our wives and want nothing but to live a peaceful life in a country that is supposed to be safe. How would it affect my social identity, I wonder, if people assume that the clothes I am wearing were a tool of oppression, that I am not allowed to represent my home in a social setting? And what does that even mean? I will never know. And that is why I have to listen. Listen carefully when people share their experience of belonging to a group the media often talks about, but seldom talks to. While I was working on this speech, I saw this on my Facebook feed. A young woman shares her article, the headline, "As a Black woman in Denmark, I never know when I become the other." The comment section had to be shut down because of the amount of hateful comments directed against her. Is it a dangerous message she's delivering? Is it radical? She's only sharing her experience. And this is what scares me. We have access to so much information, but still we seem to live in times when we have very little interest in each other. Like we are not at all curious about different views and experiences. At least it seems like a certain group of people is not worthy of a voice, not worthy of sharing their opinion and experience. They can be here, but they better lower their voices. And I worry how this tendency affects our young people that are now forming their social identities. If I was a 12-year-old girl with brown skin reading this comment section, I definitely wouldn't dare to share my thoughts and experiences. Or a 42-year-old pastor, for that sake. How can we turn this development around? I guess we just have to listen, stand strong, and refuse to let hate and anger win over love. Isam B is another Danish singer, also of Moroccan origin, born and raised in Denmark. His musical career dates back to his teenage years, and he has not been afraid to use his voice to express his experience of combining 2 cultures. His song Ramadan in Copenhagen being a beautiful example on how 2 cultures can easily thrive together. He teaches us that we should celebrate diversity instead of being afraid. And what are we so afraid of? He states, "I would rather die for love than live with hate." Amen to that. We live in times of outrage and fear, and that is not a good cocktail. A lot of people are afraid to speak their minds, people with voices that we need to hear. That is why this conversation we are having here today is so important. And we have to ask ourselves when we leave from here today, what kind of a society do I want to live in? What kind of a society do I want to pass on to my children? A society of love, understanding, and respect, which could be the title of this beautiful photo of my friend, my Muslim friend, lighting a candle in a church in Copenhagen. Or do we want a society full of fear, suspicion, and mistrust? A society where brown boys are hesitant to walk around in groups? A society where hateful words are yelled at people on the streets? A society where hundreds of hateful comments on social media are directed against innocent people that speak their minds or simply choose to take stand with love and basic human rights. That is our reality now, and we need to turn the development around, together. Luckily, it's easy, because a lot of us want a society where diversity and understanding gets to rule. There are so many of us that want to make a change, and doing that is simple. We simply need to listen, then speak up, Show those around us with words and behavior that we insist on letting go of fear. We can choose to live in fear, but the opposite of fear is knowledge and understanding. And how do we gain understanding? We get curious. We allow ourselves to get closer to each other. And I guess that is the main theme here. We need to get connected. And we do that simply by getting closer to the people around us. We can do it insecurely. We don't have to be perfect. We just have to show up authentically. That is all it takes. We too often hear about people who work hard, follow the rules of society, want nothing but an opportunity to build a life in safety. But still they don't get the permission to stay in our country, a country that has plenty of food, plenty of space, plenty of opportunities, and it breaks our heart every time. But pay attention to the fact that society around those people, the people in the children's school and kindergartens, the sport clubs, the neighbors, those are the ones who act on it and assist in every possible way. When we know people, we stand up for them when we notice them being done wrong. So our homework from today is simply to think, how am I going to get to know the people in my closest community? Sometimes a little curiosity is all we need to respond with kindness instead of anger. Often all we need to do is start a conversation. Listening to people is the easiest way to show them that they matter. Thank you for your time.